Good morning, this is Sean.
Good morning, Sean.
Little problems with the previous Cohen number, apparently.
Yeah, I also, so. All right. With that, we are live. Did Kyle call in then, or what?
I'm still waiting for him.
Is he going to handle it, or is Lee Kerr?
Lee Kerr is?
I think you can go ahead and start, Commissioner.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will call this meeting to order for Tuesday, November 17th. Oh, and I have not heard. Do we have Commissioner Peck on board?
Yes, he is here.
Okay. And Commissioner Didier?
Yes.
Okay. Well, with that, if you would join with me, the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Let allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
to the republic
to the republic
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Okay. All right. With that, our first item on the agenda this morning is we have 3 sets of minutes, October 13th, October 20th, and October 22nd, 7th, I'm sorry. So if there's no addition, changes, or corrections, we'll sign them as presented.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Didier.
Yes.
On the minutes, I noticed that on the first page it has commissioners present telephonically. I would like it to be known that Commissioner Cook, or Chairman Cook, and Commissioner Didier are in the courthouse every meeting, but Commissioner Peck is remote. I would like that added to the minutes.
Well, the truth is we're all telephonically, no matter where we're at.
Yes, but we are in the courthouse telephonically.
Yeah.
There is difference between the courthouse telephonically and remote.
Yeah.
Perhaps,
Right.
Commissioner Didier, you would explain that difference to us besides the obvious physical location.
The obvious is to interact with the courthouse and the people in the courthouse.
So noted. So we have a discussion on the.
You broke up there, Commissioner Cook. I didn't hear the last thing you said.
I'm sorry?
You made the last comment you made was broken. I didn't catch it.
I just said so noted. So all in favor with the change?
Aye.
I don't know that there is no motion or second. No objection to the meeting minutes.
Yeah. Okay. It's just an approval, so there is no motion. We're getting some feedback on something, and it's not mine this time. That better?
Sounds fine in here.
Okay.
How are you getting on?
All right.
How are you
That,
getting live stream? How are you? Perhaps anybody in the background there, you might consider muting your line. It sounds like we're getting some background conversations. Thank you.
Getting some feedback somewhere, yes. Okay. Do we have Lee Kerr on this morning?
Yes, he is on.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
our next item on the agenda then is a feasibility study results to transform OPGH, Kennewick General, into a behavioral health recovery center. And I think the commissioners should have a PowerPoint that was put out late last night. So, Lee, would you carry us through that, please?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I think online also I have Gary Long, the president of the hospital district, Michelle Gerber, Cindy Presler, and Virginia Ochoa, who are probably the greatest resources to answer any questions that commissioners might have. If they did not make it, I'll see what I can do. But yes, I'm glad that you did in fact get our PowerPoint. I'm going to go through it very, very briefly because I really wanted to not spend a lot of time on things that you already know and give you an opportunity to ask questions about things you don't know or have questions about. So the first is the background. That's really almost a thumbnail sketch of what you heard some time ago from Dr. Gerber. And I think as we discussed this back in January, and as we've had an opportunity with individual commissioners to discuss the apparent need in our area, that we are unique in that we do not have any type of available detoxification facility or inpatient residential facility for substance abuse disorder, or SUD, substance use disorder.
Mr. Kerr,
And as we,
I apologize for interrupting you, but could you speak just a little more slowly? We're using a speaker telephone system that doesn't pick up dictation quite as well. So if you wouldn't mind, please take your time if you would. Thank you.
will do. I must say that's a frequent problem, but let me pick back up in regards to the background slide that you're probably taking a look at, and I don't think there's anything new on that you haven't already heard. One thing that is the next is the benefits of comprehensive behavioral health recovery center. One slide that is not in here, but I think is self-evident, is the benefit to the individual. We have a number of people in our community that are not receiving appropriate treatment and not receiving the opportunity to be able to receive that appropriate treatment. And so I think to the individuals and the families that are affected by this, that is the primary benefit associated with the recovery center. It also has a community benefit, a number of community benefits as well, which I've identified there on the slide. I think the primary immediate benefit for cities and counties and hospitals will be the lower demands on emergency room services and jail services, which is our only two alternatives of dealing with both mental health issues, psychotic crises, and substance abuse disorders. We also allow a very important element, which is the family participation in assessment and treatment of the individual patient. Going on down, there's some economic benefits as well. We are looking at potentially probably a starting employment level of about 50 to 52 employees, with probably about 61 within the first year, and that's just addressing the substance use disorder and not the mental health issue. Also, it would be an attraction for additional medical and mental health professionals for here in the Tri-Cities, and also, as pretty obvious, is going to provide at-home treatment. As you've heard before, one of the problems is with treatment is what's called the window of opportunity. Generally, individuals have an event, some type of an event, either an overdose, an arrest, or something else that gets their attention to making a change in their lives. If we can get them right into detox, which is the critical piece, before they change their minds, then their success ratio goes, or the success option goes up considerably. If we can get them from detox into residential, that's another gap that where we lose people. It likewise greatly increases the opportunity for success. The next slide is public acceptability, and I think probably all of you have seen the op-ed in the Tri-City Herald, actually from the editorial board in regards to supporting the detox center in Kennewick. I think as we have spread the message throughout the community, we have received no negative response, which is very, very encouraging, and to a certain degree, somewhat of a surprise. But we feel that this is the right time, it's the right project. It's also in the right place because we have got the unique opportunity for this facility, which is appropriately zoned. No additional conditional use permits or other land use permits will be necessary to literally open the doors. The feasibility study that we discussed with you back in January and that you very graciously participated in consists of two major pieces. The first piece is the business plan that was prepared by Ascension, and you have that in your packet, I think, that you should have received. We were very, very lucky to be able to work with Ascension Recovery Services. They are a nationally known entity. If you look at the business plan, you can tell that basically their approach was to look at as if they were going to perform the services. And in fact, they have expressed their interest as being a candidate to do so. I think there's a couple of things that are really hallmark of what they're proposing is the no wrong door approach, the idea that there is a place where anybody can go, and from that point they'll be referred immediately to an appropriate provider. And we've also discussed before the significant potential savings in law enforcement costs, incarceration costs, as well as avoiding diverting emergency room services. One of the things that came out of this, and I'll open up questions to specifics in here. I think there's a couple things just to be mindful, and that is the program description. The program model is on page 13 of the feasibility study, page 8 of that facility, of that feasibility study, which identifies the mission, how it's to be accomplished through a central referral point for providers, and then being able to provide at one site literally all of the services necessary to be able to provide a positive opportunity for recovery. Going on, and I guess the last page on that feasibility study is the financial analysis. There are actually 14, or I guess 12 schedules in the pro forma that go everything from a department analysis to in details, but are provided to you, they provided to you, I should say, the primary forms, which is the startup budget, and the operating summary, which is also located on page 15 of the feasibility study, page 20 of page 15 of the Ascension study, and page 20 of the total feasibility study. And the conclusion was somewhat expected, but very well received, is that this thing looks like it'll work. Going on to the second portion, which is the portion associated with the conversion costs. One of the things that you see through the Archeos report is the reference to in many cases, it's literally bed ready. We have I don't know if it would be the perfect facility, but it's probably pretty darn close. But even at that, there's some costs associated with it that we required to make it completely comply with all of the state regulations, and including the full development costs, which is to address all the services, not only the SUD services, but also the mental health services. And the one other area that the state has significant interest in is what they call the pediatric transition, or CUPS, chemical using parents. That's totally unique to this area because its present use is being that of a birthing center. And the CUPS program is a program to keep and treat mothers and addicted children together for their joint recovery. Right now, there's only one other facility in the state, which is in Seattle at Swedish and Ballard, and nothing like that here on the east side of the mountains. So, as indicated, it's not without cost. We have negotiated an agreement with LifePoint to acquire the facility for a total of $1.6 million. The terms have been generous. As you probably may be aware, that property is actually, I think, is assessed at $4.5 million. So they are providing a significant contribution by reducing the purchase price and providing the terms on a favorable basis.
Sure.
We are in the process now. We've passed the back and forth, the purchase and sales agreement. We are pretty much in line with the terms and conditions. Got those pretty well hammered out. The district already has about $600,000 toward its purchase, and so I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to get that purchase and sales agreement fine-tuned quickly. Which leads us to the next steps, which is paying for this whole thing. As indicated in the previous slide, we've got an initial nut to crack of probably just under $15 million, including the facilities costs. The costs associated with the conversion is 11.2, which we think is probably pretty high. And like I said, that's the full meal deal. And so if we need to scale back some of the services, depending on who our service provider might be, that cost may be a little bit lower. But for right now, for planning purposes, we need to look at it as a full build-out cost, which would be about $15 million. As we look for how we're going to come up with the $15 million, and then make sure that this thing is going to, in fact, cash flow thereafter. As you may have noticed in that summary on the from the Ascension, this works if we don't have to repay debt for its initial acquisition and construction. And so our primary goal at this stage is to raise sufficient funds to be able to take care of those costs. As you can see from the numbers, it pretty well cash flows thereafter, just based on just SUD alone, once we get past those construction costs. We have done a number of things, as you see here on the slide. We're now making a presentation to you, and we're also making a presentation to cities. We have begun the process of trying to get this on the governor's budget, his capital budget for 2021. We're working with the Office of Financial Management and a couple of key legislators on that as well. We're hoping all our to be able to make sure we establish positive support in the state legislature for this item. And we know that's a difficult ask. We're also pursuing federal funding that may be available. The model we're using is the SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So we're looking for that sources. We have secured a grant writer, the services of a grant writer here in the state of Washington, to help us with this process going through the state and seeking federal funding. And we're also looking at local funding. We have began discussions with a firm that actually provides campaign plans. Same group that helped the Boys and Girls Club acquire their facility. And so that's kind of where we are. I guess the next thing is to open it up for questions, and I wanted to leave you with the last slide, but what do we want from you? And the first is endorsement of the project. That's a critical piece for getting us on the governor's capital budget. And we have sought assistance from endorsement from a number of people and organizations within the community. We have gotten positive responses from the city of Richland and this morning from the city of Pasco. And so we were hoping to gather that together and seeking an endorsement from Franklin County as well. The last, of course, is financial assistance. That is basically a topic for further discussions and somewhere down the pipe. I guess the main thing we're looking at right now is how to appropriately allocate the costs and where we're going to be able to get the sources for those. Just as seed for the county commissioners, we are ultimately going to be talking to you about assisting us with the security costs. The only reason we need to have security costs, which are fairly significant for the secure detox and the secure residential, is to facilitate the demands from the jails and from our law enforcement. So we would seek your assistance with that. Ultimately, what we would be seeking is a pledge. We understand that it's going to take a contribution from virtually all sources to make this go, and so we will come back to you and ask for a pledge of financial support in the future. So with that, hopefully I've given you not more than what you already know, but kind of a overview of where we are and what we've been doing in the meantime, and now open it up to questions.
Thank you, Lee. Have questions, commissioners?
Good morning, Mr. Kerr. This is Brad Peck. How are you?
I am great, Mr. Peck. Always good to hear from you.
Likewise. I guess I'll go in reverse order here since it's fresh in our minds. You made reference to a pledge from the county, financial pledge. What do you have any idea of the scope or duration? Are you talking about upfront capital acquisition costs? Are you talking about long-term O&M costs?
Well, at this point, I'm only talking about capital. You know, it's upfront costs to be able to get the facility rolling. My hope is that this projection made by Ascension that it's self-sustaining is the way I think we're going to be able to handle M&O. But I think that's going to be something to be addressed. The main thing right now is capital. You're right.
Yeah. Well, certainly consultants have never missed the mark on their financial projections. So,
or maybe once or twice.
Yeah, maybe. So, I've probably got a couple of dozen questions. So I'm going to try and narrow it down to about 2, maybe 3. The report from Arculus and Ascension came in, back in February sometime?
Well, we started, actually what happened was that, when we started this all, everything was honky-dory, but then COVID came in and we had some significant delays in getting the materials from Ascension. They were all trying to work from home as we were. We ended up getting the material from Ascension in May. At that time, we realized, however, that they had not used some of the current Washington reimbursement rates. And so primarily Virginia Ochoa and Cindy Presdo were able to work with them to get them up to speed. So we've essentially had their report since late May, early June. We didn't have the Arculus report until October. I think it was October 28th when we finally got that. So that was part of the delay on getting it all together.
Okay. All right. Well, that explains that. I was just curious why some of the initial documents look like they went back to February and we're not seeing it till the end of October. And of course, as our interlocal agreement says, those documents are co-owned by the organization and the counties. And so I was concerned that it looked like they were available months ago and yet we didn't get to see them, but you've cleared that up for me, so I appreciate it. On your introductory remarks, and I'll certainly give you a fair amount of latitude here because we've all sort of referred to this as a particular type of activity or facility. But even today, here in November, after all the discussions we've had about behavioral health. Your introduction talked about detox and SUD and 52 workers, but that won't include mental health, and getting people right into detox in timely manner is critical. All of the dialogue really resonates with detox and SUD. And of course, we all know that the reality is co-occurring disorders are common, where people have both mental health challenges and addiction issues. And I don't know anyone that would argue that they don't need to be treated together. But my interest is in getting to a level of confidence that this facility is going to provide mental health crisis services separate and aside from any substance use disorder. Is that the intent? Is that we would provide those kind of mental health services and that they would be a primary function on the same tier as SUD? Is that the plan?
That is the plan. If you look at the vision, it clarifies a little bit. Part of the reason for that is that as we began this, and I think as we made our first approach to it, we were looking only at SUD. And the clear message after meeting with you, and the Benton County Commissioners and others in the community was that we need more. We need to make sure that we have a crisis intervention center, a transition center, where we can literally do a 10-minute drop-off from the police officers and have a place where you literally have no wrong door. And so, and that's why you see in the Ascension report the primary focus on SUD, because that's where we began. And then as we saw that it needed to be expanded, that's where we, like I say, and that's why you see to a certain degree a disconnect between just the SUD addressed in the Ascension report and the mental health issues that are addressed with less particularity, because they like I said, they didn't. That was kind of beyond the original scope, but still addressed in there. So yes, the vision is that we see this under the umbrella of behavioral health, consisting of two components, SUD and mental health, and that both would be addressed at this location.
And they would be co-equal, co-occurring services. By co-equal, I don't mean necessarily the same amount of people or resources, but dedicated to meeting the needs. In other words, one is not subordinate to the other. I hate to hammer on the point too heavily, but over the course of several months, a number of us have been kind of beating this drum, and yet here today, a lot of the language still articulates and focuses on detox and SUD. So I'm just trying to drive home the point that, at least for me, unless this has a robust mental health crisis services, not separate from the SUD, but on par with the SUD, that's going to be basically a go, no-go for me to support county involvement. I think the program is absolutely phenomenal. I just feel very, very strongly that to do one in isolation without the other is a mistake that we'll end up trying to remedy later at a much higher cost. So I'd like to see us do it all up front. I appreciate your support of that notion.
Yeah, agreed. And you hit it right on the head, is that literally there's so much overlap between those that are suffering from mental health issues and SUD issues that it's just impossible to sort that out. And yes, that would be the intent. Like I said in the mission, the intent is no wrong door. I mean, this is right.
Well, I would just ask that any future documents, presentations, we maybe just make the reference to the mental health side more robust. It appears that the advocates for this program, the people who have put so much energy and passion into it, are not by exclusion of mental health, but by interest, are very focused on the SUD. So I think it's going to take a concerted effort to balance those out and to present this to the community in a way that is clear that it is fully both. I also want to point out that I'm sure there's been some email hiccups here and there, but at least to my knowledge, the Ascension and Arculus reports only made their way to my inbox here in the last 24 hours. So I really apologize for not having had time to get through those in detail yet, but I will. The 509 Recovery Group is now the Recovery Coalition. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's one and the same. Yeah, it's the Benton Franklin Recovery Coalition. And
Okay, good.
I think Michelle Gerber's on the line as well, so she can answer any questions specifically to that.
Okay. So, and that is a private, not-for-profit organization that I'm guessing exists through the good graces and donated time and energy of a lot of people, meaning there really aren't a funded organization to speak of, right?
That's absolutely correct.
And let me just say up front where I'm going with this. There's been some concern expressed in different quarters about their work and their meetings maybe not being very open to the public, and looking at them as a private not-for-profit with a lot of donated effort. I don't know that there is an obligation for them to hold public meetings. You're the attorney here. Does that fit with your understanding?
That's correct. They're not subject to the Open Meetings or the Open Records or the Records Act, but they are very, very open. I know they do a pretty good job of distributing their meeting dates and times and places, and it's certainly in there.
Maybe they could add me to their distribution list, then. I'd very much like to maybe make a visit and learn some more.
Will do.
And Mr. Kerr, unless you've got a question for me, I think that covers what I wanted to address this morning. And hopefully we can find the mechanisms that make this work. Obviously, the finances are less exciting for some people, but having a good, robust program 5 years from now depends on us doing good financial homework today. I'm sure you all appreciate that. And that and the mental health piece are my two big concerns. And that does prompt one other question I meant to ask. What I've been able to pull together information on this sounds like an awful lot of the financial input revenue stream that's being assumed here is through Medicaid. Is that an accurate assessment from where you sit?
It is, and that's traditionally through the industry, the primary source of revenue. There is private insurance, and then there's also private pays. But yes, the big piece is Medicare, or Medicaid, pardon me.
Okay, and I saw a reference somewhere to Hanford, DOE, Hanford workers, and that being a revenue stream, but it wasn't clear to me whether that was for drug testing, whether that was for SUD treatment. Can you help me a little bit there?
Yeah, it's primarily for treatment. Basically, what it boils down to is that it would be generally through either an employee benefit or an employee or employer insurance that would pay for that. There's been a concern raised that there's just nobody locally that can help them out. So yeah, it's probably the primary revenue source there would be insurance.
Is there any reason to think that population is any more prone to SUD than our population at large? And if not, why would we look to them as a particular revenue stream?
I don't know the answer to that question. That's really a Michelle Gerber question. I know that she has spent a lot of time in dealing with this, coming out of the area herself. She has some good connections there. So I defer to her on that one.
I don't know if you can hear me. Is that possible?
Yes.
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is Michelle. And it's really good to speak to you, Mr. Peck. We don't think that Hanford workers have any higher rates of SUD than anyone else. It's simply that they have an employee assistance program, and they're sending people who need that type of service. They're sending them to treatment agencies all over the state, and in fact, all over the West Coast. And we just think that we'd like to divert that stream of patients and that stream of revenue to our own area, so those dollars would stay local. We'd also be looking at other large employers just for an example, Lamb Weston, although I haven't had any discussions with them, or Cadlet, another large employer, and seeing if their employee assistance programs might send their patients to this local center rather than sending them away from the area.
Okay, well, I certainly suspected that that was the answer, and I wasn't meaning in any way to suggest that the Hanford workers have a higher SUD propensity. But I did want to have that discussion so that we could air it out, because really I think what you're saying is it just happens that the people working in that area have very good benefits, and if and when they need it, then there's funding available for them. I know Energy Northwest, which is not part of the Hanford cleanup, but is located on the Hanford Reservation, also has excellent benefits of that nature. And like you mentioned, Lamb Weston. So it wasn't as much a concern as it was airing that out so that people listening and for the record would understand that those references to Hanford workers wasn't meant to imply anything other than that they have good health benefits. I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. If other people have questions, certainly I'd be interested in hearing those. Thank you.
Okay. Further questions, commissioners?
Yes, this is Commissioner Didier. First of all, I'd just like to ask the question, and it may not have an answer, but what percentage of the SUDs become mental illness?
Commissioner, that's a good question. I don't have the answer to that. Michelle, do you have any, are you aware of the research on that?
Well, the research shows that the co-occurring or comorbidity is very high. I can't give you a percentage, but it is the rule rather than the exception.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I figured, because we're finding that people that do have SUD problems, they tend to overtax their brains with this drugs and therefore become incoherent. And I think they intermingle very well. The comparison is that one causes the other, but not in all cases. I'm not saying it's all cases, because we didn't have mental facilities because of drug addiction way back in our history. My other question is, have you talked to Mirror Ministries? Because we were posed a question here about putting a facility in a residential area for the abused girls. Now, looking at the picture of the facility, I see is it a 4-story building or a 3-story building to the left of the facility? Is that part of it?
That is part of it. That's the Spalding building. It's primarily been utilized as doctor's offices and things like that. The other thing is, you look at the art village, you see the very last picture in there shows an aerial shot of the facility with the red line around.
Yep.
Everything we're talking about right now is pointing within that red-lined area. So there is another, almost 50,000 square feet available for other uses, which may be transitional housing, maybe, like I said, for other opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, because what my question is, all of these instances and these girls that have been sexually abused, they have mental problems also. I'm talking about consolidating and having your medical staff, your psychiatrist, everybody in the one location, so they're not having to travel to different facilities, but you isolate and you separate, and you could have all of these instances in one spot for people to get help. And therefore the doctors and the physicians and everything are centrally located right there. It's better efficiency of the funds, the taxpayers' funds, and a better access to all the needs of these people to be in one spot. And I was wondering if you had reached out to Mirror Ministries because I understand they have a lot of money, and I tell you, we need to do something here for these girls, and they want a setting that's remote and out in the country. You know what? I would love to have that for them, but more importantly, we need a facility for them to be able to go to.
If I could butt in for just a minute here, Commissioner Didier, this is Sheriff Raymond. Mirror Ministries, all of those ancillary private groups, if you will, they're all attached and working with the current coalition, trying to take an overall broad approach to these issues. So Mirror Ministries is technically on board and has an understanding that they would have a place at the table when the time comes, once this project advances forward. So, sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to make sure that you understood that.
Well, that's good news, because they haven't been mentioned anywhere in this presentation, and I understand that they have quite a sum of money there that they want to invest. So I think that would be a great addition to this project, and I'm all for it, as long as we don't make it a magnet for outside problems, and we take care of our own here in the Tri-City area. But with that comes problems also, because if you don't, the thing about playing in the NFL was, if you removed them from their state, they wouldn't be distracted and they'd be more focused on the game plan and playing and being successful. Here you've got outside sources that are interacting with these people, and you put them in there. Is that going to create an undue amount of pressure on that building for people trying to get in there? These are questions that I'm asking.
Yeah, to a certain degree, I think I feel the primary purpose is to treat our region, the Tri-City region, and it's being sized for that specific purpose. Now, one thing, you're a political veteran, as you know, that as we look out for funding, we're going to be having to do some jockeying in regards to strings that may be attached to funding. So that's going to be an issue that's going to be constantly before us. So, and we share the same goal. We share the same goal. This is to solve our problem.
Thank you. Have you met with Benton County yet on this?
No, we're going to be with them next Tuesday, same time.
Good deal. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. And I think from what I've been hearing, we have Franklin County support at this point. So we'll look forward to more information.
Thank you very much. Like I said, we'd appreciate the endorsement, and like I said, we'll come back to talk to you about money. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to Gary Bratton, please. We have a conditional use permit 2019-07, expansion of existing preschool. Derek on board?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair Cook. Thank the board. Yes, as a request to renew an existing preschool license as well as expand the existing facility by approximately adding about enough room for 60 new students. Right now, the place has, I believe, 44. So it'd be around 100, just over 100 students total after, assuming it's approved. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. Is that going to be able to be shown?
Yes, I'm getting.
All right, thank you. So, as mentioned, it's CUP 2019-07, conditional use permit, Rainbow River Childcare. Located in the West Pasco area, in the UGA, low density residential, bordered to the north. It's just within our boundaries, with Argent being the city. There's a vicinity map. East-west is Argent, north-south 72. Next. Again, to renew and expand an existing childcare facility, they propose to use the entire property, 1.17 acres, to build it out. Right now, it's just, there's an existing classroom, and then there's a smaller classroom facility on there. So there's two buildings and playground stuff. As I mentioned, going from 44, oh yes, sorry, details. 12,000 square feet for outdoor play area, 6,760 for classroom space. There's no critical areas. It does need a conditional use permit in that zone. And the SEPA determination is non-significant, meaning that everything, all conditions or requirements are already required under existing law, whether it's local, state, or federal. So that's why it was provided to DNS. Hey, Derek. Yeah, sure. Quick question. In the documentation, in some places you refer to as the DNS, and others it's an MDNS. Why did you make that distinction in the read aheads? My guess is that was a typo, and I apologize for that. An MDNS is a specific SEPA designation. Exactly. That requires mitigations above and beyond those under required law. The DNS, or the SEPA determination for this proposal, was a DNS, and I apologize for that being in the work.
No, that's fine. I just, knowing the difference, I needed to know which it was. Thank you.
Yeah. Here's a site plan. The existing daycare is, the primary building is right there, almost dead center in the picture. The new stuff begins over on the left, on the west edge of the property. That's that big L. Yep. Now, right there, there's an existing piece that will be adding on to that existing structure, both to the north and then south, and most of the area is south. And that building there, we don't believe have any, there's no proposal for modification of that building. The one that says existing daycare. So that's, and then they're going to put in a 20 by 20, if I remember right, or 20 by 40 greenhouse, so the kids can actually, play with plants and stuff like that as well. Then the new parking is in the opposite corner, in the southeast corner. That's where the new 6 parking spaces for the expansion is proposed to be located. Any questions on that? They're a lot better on this than my printout slides. And this is kind of like a close-up site plan of the actual building, floor plan, sorry. And again, you see existing is called out there. These are pictures of the site. Again, it's in a residential area. Been there for about 10 years. Next slide. This is the area to be developed. Looks pretty rough right now, so. Next. So as you can see, we set it out for agents comment August 3rd. We got comments, but there were more questions than complaints. How are they addressing this? Those types of things. They were neutral. Set it out for public comment on the SEPA determination July 30th. We received no comments from the public by the due date. Then we sent it out, and you'll see there's some delays here, and that has to do with the COVID and being able to get things moving again. This was another application that was submitted in 2019. It was moving forward, and then COVID hit, and that's why we have these gaps in some of these dates. So we finally were able to get going with planning commission meetings again. So we sent it out for public comment, and again, basically a second notice to the public to remind them, hey, we're moving on these items again that you may have been contacted about earlier in the year. Again, one comment requesting that there was a noise barrier, and that was already a condition that was proposed by the applicant. So the Franklin County Planning Commission on October 27, 2020 recommends that the Franklin County Board of Commissioners approve the application with 6 suggested findings of fact, and that's based, of course, if they can meet the 11 suggested conditions of approval.
I'm not going to go too heavy into these. I'm just going to go through them. As you can see, each of the findings of fact have sub-findings as well. But it's determined that this use is in accordance with the Coles policies. It's an allowed use with a conditional use permit. It's specifically listed as a listed use with a conditional use permit. We've got plenty of access. Though there is an increase in generated trips, Public Works has determined that is not an increase that triggers or achieves a trigger point where we're going to have to do additional traffic or impact on the road system. And then the existing septic has to be removed. Yep.
Yeah, Commissioner Peck, that Public Works assessment, I'm sure looked at both Argent, the main arterial there, and also the north-south route, correct?
That would be my understanding. Yeah, they're pretty good about hitting all those potential feeders and seeing how that affects things.
Okay, I'll educate myself later, but it does beg the question of how they know which route people are going to take. But okay, thank you.
There's actually a science behind that. Is Matt there?
Hey, Derek.
Yeah.
Let's not dig into.
Okay.
Well, it's a quasi-judicial matter, and we're limited to the closed record.
Right. Okay. Again, we're not seeing anything that would, discourage the development of permitted uses in the vicinity. It's a center that's been there for 10 years. We have no records of any code complaint. It'll look residential, very similar, and then there'll be landscaping and fencing to help screen the actual site. And
Derek, Commissioner Peck again. I've got a number of questions. Would you prefer I ask them as you're on that topic, or have you do them from memory later?
That's fine. Whichever's fine.
Okay, so my experience with SUPs and CUPs is that they run with the land, not with the applicant. And I've experienced that personally with the city of Pasco. And so do you have a definitive answer about whether or not under Washington law this CUP runs with the land or with the applicant? And part of that is that you referenced a 10-year window, which implies at least that the CUP has a 10-year life. Can you within the record here, can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, basically under law, a conditional use permit and that allowed use can be assigned to run with the land, or it can be assigned to an actual operator, especially in a licensing situation where there's a license required, or it can be termed, where it either runs with the land or, for example,
that's good enough, Derek. In the interest of time and keeping us within the limits of the record, that's good. That's new information. I appreciate it. So this was originally under a 2004 CUP that it appears from the record ran for 10 years until 2014. And at any point of this that I get it wrong, please stop me.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the record, it speaks to the applicant taking over the business. It appears in about 2016 because it refers to the last 4 years, and this being 2020, the last 4 years will go back to 2016. Yep. So was this business running from 2016 to 2014 without a use permit?
Yes, it was.
Is that reflected anywhere in the record?
I honestly can't recall.
Was it discussed in the planning commission meeting?
I'm sorry?
Was it discussed in the planning commission meeting?
I believe it was, but I can't recall 100% on that.
Okay. And let me be clear. I'm just bringing light to the situation. I don't want anyone to misinterpret I'm not suggesting that, the fact that they ran without a permit is a reason to resist them getting in compliance. On the contrary, I'm glad to see they're working to get in compliance.
Exactly.
Let's see, the CUP from 2004 to 2014, it was operating most of that time as a daycare facility, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. You refer to this as in the record as a CUP renewal, but in fact, because it is unique to the applicant and not the property, and because there is a 6-year gap between, could you help me understand why this is a renewal as opposed to a new CUP?
Not specifically. I mean, because there was a pre-existing CUP, technically you are correct in that upon reflection that due to the fact that it did term out, technically this would be a new CUP. It has to do with the fact that it's operating under the same basic use, but I do believe you are correct upon reflection that this should actually be listed as a new CUP for an existing facility that was operating technically.
Right. So I would agree with you if you were to say that there's not really a lot of difference, but I do think there is some. And the sum speaks to, if it's a renewal, then conditions of approval from a previous CUP might logically carry over in a renewal unless they're specifically excluded. So the distinction between a renewal and a new one actually does have some significant implications potentially. Now, in tracing this back in the record, I was a little bit limited because, again, we're limited to looking at the record. And as best I could ascertain, I didn't see the conditions of approval from the 2004 CUP because it wasn't in the record. So I went looking for them in the 2020 application, and I found them in the package that you put together. The difficulty I'm having is that when I looked at the motion in the minutes made by the Planning Commission, it included 6 findings of fact, but there were no conditions of approval. So could you? Okay, so somebody simply failed to include it in the minutes. It's just basically a typo?
Correct.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. So in the discussion in the Planning Commission, was there discussion, and I'm asking because I don't remember the details in the minutes now, was there discussion of these specific conditions of approval, and or were they added by your staff? What's the genesis or the root of those 11 conditions?
Those 11 conditions were provided to the Planning Commission as part of the recommendation from staff. The Planning Commission, upon their motion,
okay, go ahead.
Upon their motion, made no recommendations to change or amend those conditions.
Perfect. All right. That's great. That's very helpful. Moving along, in those conditions, it speaks to setbacks. That's in 1A. Are those the standard setbacks for a home on this same lot, or are they different for this kind of an activity?
No, there would be no increased setback requirement unless specifically called out.
Okay, so they're standard. Okay. Some of the conditions use the phrase "as required," and it gets gray as to whether or not they actually do have to. The words "as required" in condition of approval 1CI, it speaks about connecting to the city sewer system. And from reading the record, it frankly wasn't clear whether or not they were required to connect to the city system. Can you just confirm that it is a condition?
Yeah,
Okay.
they are,
All right.
they are required, there's not adequate area with the build and everything to maintain the required, for the septic system. The size would be so huge. So there's an existing septic that will be removed because it was adequate for the existing facility.
I understand the merits of it, and I certainly agree. I just, looking at the record and reading the language, I think it's important that we have clarity so that somebody reading it in the future, for example, knows exactly what is and isn't required. And to me, it read pretty gray. Water is from a well or city water. I saw no reference to city water, so that leaves a well.
They're already connected to city water.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And item 1H, state fire marshal approval, is it required or not?
Again, some of this has to do with the licensing requirements from the state agency. My assumption is that the state agency will require that, but it's not known. It depends on the size of the facilities and the specific services being provided.
Okay. So here's where it gets interesting for me, is that we're setting conditions of approval from the county, and we're not requiring that apparently, but other agencies may.
Correct.
Correct. So I would ask you, please, if you would just in the future maybe give a little bit of thought to language in there to more clearly articulate that, and maybe it's a standalone condition of approval that says, while the following conditions are not specifically required by Franklin County, the following conditions may be imposed by other municipalities, agencies, etc., and so that's one of the conditions. Just because in reading it, it was, if I were the applicant here, from the language, I couldn't tell you whether or not it was actually required or not. So that's just a request for a little more clarity in the future, if you wouldn't mind. And same thing with 1L and 1M. It's all the same kind of language. Conditions of approval, item 9. Would you mind, since I don't have it right in front of me, would you read 9 for me, please?
In accordance with county zoning code, any special permit may be revoked by the Board of Commissioners if, after a public hearing, it is found that the conditions upon which the special permit was authorized have not been fulfilled, or if the use authorized has changed in size, scope, nature, or intensity, so as to become a detriment to the surrounding area. The decision of the board is final. Is that the one you're talking about?
Right, and so as to become a detriment to the surrounding area. So they could be out of compliance so long as it wasn't a detriment to the surrounding area, is how that reads. So again, respectfully, just go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it was found condition. So if they haven't fulfilled one of the conditions, it can be revoked, and that would be also some of the things listed. So, anyways, let me know how you'd like that worded, because my job here is not to convince you that my wording's right. My job here is to make sure that I'm wording things that you guys get the information you need.
Okay. Well, the reason I come to this is because we've already covered that this applicant has been running a facility for 4 years without a permit, and so the language there becomes important. Well, you and I can take it up outside. It's not something that we've got to sort out right now, and we've covered what we can out of the record. And in condition 11,
yes.
And can you just assure me that this, like the rest of this package, likely has been reviewed by our civil legal folks?
Yes, this is a piece of language the board requested back in 2018 to be added on to CUPs.
Right, Right, but it's been through a legal review.
Correct.
Okay, that was the question. In reading it, I wasn't sure if it had. Okay, and thanks very much for bearing with me and going through all that.
Not a problem. Right why we're here.
Commissioner Cook, that's what I have for this morning.
Commissioner Cook, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had it on mute.
You were one of the few.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Okay, Commissioner Didier, any further questions?
No question.
All right, well, there was a good conversation and a good read ahead. So with that, I would entertain a motion for Resolution 2020-262.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of Resolution 2020-262 as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you. Going to mute. Mute, I mean.
With that, as always, we have a public comment period. It's open at any time. So if there's any, is there any comments open, Keith?
Yes, I have 3 callers on hold on the line.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. McHugh.
Yeah, good morning.
Thank you for your patience. You are now online with the Board of Commissioners. We have up to 3 minutes, please.
Okay, just quickly, I wanted to let the commissioners know, I went to go get a trial date the other day by calling into the clerk's office, and Franklin County is not scheduling any trials, at least for domestic matters, at all. They don't do pre-trial conferences, and also don't have an answer for whenever they're going to begin doing trials at all. So whenever you're like me and involved in a dispute, there's no end in sight currently at all in Franklin County, or Benton County for that matter either. I don't think that's acceptable at all in this county. And even in King County, you can get a trial, no problem right now. They're scheduling that, and for some reason, Franklin County and Benton County isn't, with no response as to why, and no absolute date when they will accept a trial, or when they're going to accept a scheduling, no waiting list, no nothing. It's completely out in the open. I just looked in King County. I have a friend that's in a civil trial today. They're doing it via Zoom. And whenever you read on their website, you can schedule a trial or a pre-trial conference. So I don't know what the commissioners can do, but I just quickly wanted to relay that information to our commissioners if they don't know that, and ask them to put all the pressure they can on our court system to get the court system back up and running, because they can. There's no reason for them not to. Other counties in Washington are doing it, even with this extra new shutdown. They're doing it today. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse in Franklin County. And I would also extend an invite if any commissioner wants to know an extreme circumstance like mine, how it affects my life. I'd welcome that privately, and they can have the whole story. I don't think that's the place to put out in a public format, but I strongly urge our commissioners to do whatever they can in their power to get our court system working. That's it. Unless y'all have any questions.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know as a matter of practice, we don't do Q&As with calls, but it might be productive for the prosecuting attorney if he wishes to speak to rules that we may or may not be operating under and how one county might be able to do it differently than us. It's up to him, but it seems that there's a pretty significant question on the table that benefits a wide audience.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is Sean Sam, prosecuting attorney I can address, there has been a recent rule change that came out, or a proclamation that was issued by the courts that does allow for trials, including domestic and civil, to continue under certain requirements. I would suggest that the individual refer to emergency order issued by the courts, and that's number 5E as in Edward, and that was just released on November 13th. And it describes the very lengthy process of how trials are to continue.
Okay, my call-in last week was to the clerk, and so maybe that new one came out. I haven't seen that one yet, and I'll look it up. But hopefully things get underway soon.
I'm not sure if that posted yet to their website, but I would specifically look for that order. And you can contact my office if you'd like after the meeting, and I can provide a copy of the order to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. McHugh.
Yes. Thanks, Sean. Okay. Next, Keith, please.
Good morning, Mrs. Burt.
Yes?
Yes, this is Keith Johnson, County Administrator, Franklin County. You have the floor in the County Commissioners meeting for 3 minutes, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, thank you for taking my call. I would just like to say if the commissioners could please look up Wells County, Colorado. This has gone viral. Right now, the commissioners, the county in Colorado, the commissioners said after the meeting that nothing was going to change in Wells County. Business could continue to operate as they have been at the speed they are comfortable with. Urging businesses to follow best practices and do what is right to help slow the spread. So this county never shut down. The commissioners knew that they could make the decision to protect their businesses, protect their people, and they have saved their county. Saved the future of my 5-year-old feet. And I can't help it if he I would also like you to hear a few, please put him on the phone, to hear a few comments from our parent coalition. We have 1,600 families in our parent coalition right now. From Tara Child, she said, ask them to let us remain open. Well, Colorado never closed down. Their commissioners fought for them. This is from another member. Stay open. Our kids deserve to be in school. They need to be out of their bedrooms and off of screens. Our children. I don't know if you've been watching the news, but there was a suicide, Christian Robbins, in Richland, and it was a result of the shutdown. There's going to be a national story on him. I think it's the Washington Post coming out soon. The teens in the community are just contacting us. I just am getting messages just night and day. They're really scared for each other. They know there's going to be more suicides. Some have told me that they've had several teens that they've tried to talk out of. They've had to talk out of suicide. The teens in our community have gone to the media, done interviews. They've been interviewed by news stations, all 3 news stations, to try to figure out. We even had 2 high school students. One's a football player that is going to Eastern Washington. The other's a wrestler. They came to a rally and spoke to the community. And it wasn't for a political reason. They came because they wanted to bring awareness that high school students can see that they're scared for each other. We've got to do something before there is just more suicide. These teens are super scared. We've got to make some changes in our community. One other thing I want to say is childcare. We've got to address the childcare. I need some childcare. I called in, spoke to you guys last week. I mean, I need Boys and Girls Club. I've been on a waiting list at Boys and Girls Club now for months and months. And they say there's not enough capacity for him. I mean, there's CARES Act money. What can you guys do to get more capacity in these places? I mean, parents are desperate. I listened to a little bit of the Benton County meeting this morning, and they talked about a joint letter with the 3 cities. And I think that's a great idea, but that's not enough. You guys can do something. Look up Wells, Colorado, see what they did. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your comment. Good morning. You are in the county commissioners. Can you identify?
Yes.
Can you identify that you're a Franklin County resident?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. You have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the feasibility study for the Behavioral Recovery Center. I would just encourage the commissioner and the administration to reach out to the Pendleton, Oregon community. I'm aware that they have quite a few of these centers there, and just to find out how that's impacted their city. If this would open the door to other small businesses, so that there would be, you know, just having this one, if that would open the door for smaller businesses of the same type, and how it's affected local business and the number of citizens that attend these recovery centers, how many of them stay in the community that are from outside areas. So I would just encourage the commissioners to look into that information to see how it's affected that local community.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the callers we have on the line at this time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. That will bring us down to the approval of paying the bills, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have two fiscal items this morning. The first is fund expenditures. The move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $1,476,134.48.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 And Mr. Chairman, the second item is salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll. Move for approval of those expenditures in the total amount of $986,268.80.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. We will bring us on to the consent agenda. We have consent agenda 1 through 7 today.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, move for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I second.
Okay, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That, I just had one question about facilities disposal. Did Jennifer say how she's going to dispose of these? I'll follow up with Jennifer later. That's not that. Okay.
Yeah, I believe these I'm going to have to follow up, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
I couldn't find anything in the
doesn't
read
say
ahead,
whether
so,
they're being donated or whether they're being sold at auction or something.
yeah.
They're all fairly small tools, but.
So, thank
yeah.
you. With that, let's bring us up to your time on the agenda. Keith, please.
Yes, I think.
Chairman, this is Commissioner Peck. Before we move on from the consent, I just want to make an observation. It was on the last consent item. I didn't feel we needed to discuss it because I supported approving it. But that was a HAVA grant for improving our election systems, including technology. And I can't swear to this, but my research suggests that Franklin County is running, I think it's Dominion software, and is, I think, the only one in the state of Washington using this software. And this particular software has been tied to particular political interests, but is really at the center of some of the controversy in a number of states and their voting counts, in particular Arizona. So I'm not suggesting anything here other than I'm pleased to see that we are getting grant monies to improve our technology, and would ask that we look at whatever software it is we're running and assure ourselves that it is appropriate. If I'm right, it's Dominion, and if it is Dominion, I'd like to see us look very closely as to whether or not that's the right answer for us. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Keith?
Okay, I just received a message from Jennifer that these tools that were included in that surplus disposal are no longer functional, and so they're just going to be disposing of those. They've been used up and no longer work. On to my other administration office business. As everyone I'm sure is aware, Governor Inslee made some new orders yesterday regarding COVID restrictions and the closure of businesses that had heretofore been opened under our phase. We know that's going to have an impact in our local community. I know that the city managers and city councils of the communities in the Tri-Cities area are considering a joint letter to the governor's office, essentially opposing further closure of businesses. And they have asked whether the county is interested in either a joint letter with Benton County or joining with the cities in stating an opposition to what the governor's proposed. But they asked us to consider, at least have that discussion of what, if any, steps Franklin County wishes to take in terms of responding to the governor's latest decisions.
So Keith, I'll just offer that I'm interested in doing this. I just would have to see the content of any such letter before I could agree to participate. But conceptually, sure.
I know the Benton County Board is having the same discussion this morning. I have no idea what will come from that discussion, but if they desire to pursue a joint letter, we'll certainly get the language of that in front of the commissioners before approving it.
Yeah, and I would ask that we could see that well in advance of the meeting so that we're not in a position of having to accept or reject something that someone else has, produced without our input. So a draft would be awesome. Thanks.
Certainly.
And Keith, if you wouldn't mind, I think we should be reaching out to other counties here in Eastern Washington, because I hope the other commissioners will look up Weld, Colorado, because I have been saying this for months now. They also refused to obey the orders of the governor. They opened up. There was a threat of a lawsuit, never happened. Threatened to hold back their CARES Act money, didn't happen. And they've been open full go. This lockdown is uncalled for. It's unjust. We know that these tests are not even The last I heard, they're 50% accurate. And we are hurting and destroying our communities. And there are people that are losing everything they've worked for if they haven't lost it already. And I think as it goes by right now, I think we need to make a stand. And we will have an undue amount of counties in eastern Washington join us. And I hope that we will stand up to this governor who is out of control and challenge him on this, because he challenged the president on statehood and sanctuary cities, saying that he only has control over federal lands, the president that is, and this way, this governor only has control over the state lands, and the county lands he has no control over, and we should take control of it and make a statement here.
I certainly will take all of that into consideration as we draft language for a potential letter. Certainly give each of you commissioners input into that. At the end of the day, it's your letter, it's not my letter. So I certainly value that input. Other than that, commissioners, I don't know that I have anything else for your discussion today. Just remind you that the State Association of Counties Leaders Conference is going on this week. I know several of you have committee meetings associated with that, as do I, and that is being done online throughout the rest of this week. With that, Commissioner Cook, that's all I have for today.
All right, Keith, thank you very much. Commissioners, anything else for the good of the board?
Yes, Chairman, this is Commissioner Didier again. Tomorrow is our Board of Health meeting, and in this crisis, I cannot believe it has been canceled due to WASAC. I think that the community is at turmoil, and we need to be addressing this with the Board of Health.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Hearing nothing else, we are adjourned for today. Thank you.